My daughter-in-law called me an embarrassment in front of her rich friends at my own birthday party. I stood up, walked to the front door where someone was waiting. Someone she never expected would destroy her perfect image forever. Before we start, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. The words still echo in my mind even now, months later. You're an embarrassment to this family, Margaret. Victoria had said it with such casual cruelty, as if discussing the weather, not destroying the woman who'd raised her children for 8 years. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 68 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I was wrong. Nothing prepares you for being discarded by the people you love most, especially when you've given them everything. Let me paint you a picture of who I was before that horrible night. I wasn't always the gray-haired woman in sensible shoes that Victoria found so embarrassing. Once I was a registered nurse who worked double shifts to put my son David through college. I was the wife who held my husband's hand through 3 years of cancer treatments, never leaving his side until the very end. When Robert died 5 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But then David asked me to move in with them, said the kids needed their grandmother, said he needed his mother. How could I refuse? Emma was only 3 then, still calling me Gamma because she couldn't pronounce grandma properly. Josh was 5, obsessed with dinosaurs and constantly asking me to read him the same book about T-Rex every single night. They became my reason to keep going, my second chance at purpose. I sold my house, the one Robert and I had lived in for 35 years, and moved into their guest room. The money from the sale. Most of it went to helping David and Victoria when the economy crashed and David lost his marketing job. $40,000, handed over without hesitation, because that's what family does. Victoria had hugged me then, tears in her eyes, calling me a lifesaver. I became their everything. The free childcare that allowed Victoria to build her real estate empire, the cook who had dinner ready every night, the tutor who helped with homework, the nurse who stayed up with sick children so they could sleep. My arthritis got worse from carrying laundry up and down stairs, but I never complained. My pension covered my medicines and nothing more, but I never asked for anything. I wore the same clothes I'd had for years, shopped at thrift stores, clipped coupons. Victoria's walk-in closet was full of designer clothes, while I had 3 pairs of shoes, but that was fine. Seeing my grandchildren happy, watching my son rebuild his career, knowing I was useful, needed, loved, that was worth more than any designer label. Or so I thought until my 68th birthday, when I learned that love, sacrifice, and devotion meant nothing if you didn't look the part in Victoria's new world. Life had a beautiful rhythm in those days before everything changed. I'd wake at 5:30 a.m. without an alarm clock, my body naturally stirring with the first hints of dawn creeping through the guest room curtains. Those quiet morning moments were mine alone. I'd slip into my worn terry cloth robe, the one Robert had given me for our last anniversary together, and pad quietly to the kitchen. The coffee maker would gurgle to life while I prepared lunch boxes. Emma always wanted her sandwich cut diagonally, never straight across, with exactly 3 strawberries and her juice box positioned on the right side. Josh preferred everything separated. Sandwich in one compartment, crackers in another, apple slices that I'd sprinkle with lemon juice to keep from browning. I'd slip little notes into their boxes. "Have a great day, sunshine," for Emma. "Score a goal for Grandma," for Josh on soccer days. By 6:30, breakfast was ready. Scrambled eggs for David, always with a dash of milk the way he'd liked them since childhood. Victoria only ever grabbed a protein shake, rushing around in her high heels, phone pressed to her ear even at that early hour. The kids would stumble in sleepy-eyed, and I'd help Emma with her tangled morning hair while Josh recounted his dreams between bites of toast. After the morning chaos settled and everyone left, the house became mine. I'd water my garden first, talking to my plants like old friends. The tomatoes were my pride, huge red beefsteaks that made the neighbors jealous. Mrs. Chen from next door would often peer over the fence, asking my secret. Love and coffee grounds. I'd tell her with a wink. The basil, oregano, and parsley grew wild and fragrant. These simple plants connected me to my mother, who taught me to garden with these same varieties in her own backyard 50 years ago. Mornings meant household chores done my way, at my pace. Laundry sorted properly, not rushed. Floors mopped with care, especially under the kitchen table where Josh always managed to drop crumbs despite his best efforts. I'd dust the family photos on the mantel, pausing at my favorite, all of us at the beach last summer, before Victoria became too busy for family vacations. Afternoons brought my favorite part of the day, school pickup. Emma would run to me with artwork clutched in her small hands, eager to show me her latest masterpiece. Josh, trying to act cool in front of his friends, would still sneak his hand into mine once we turned the corner. We'd stop at the park sometimes, where I'd push Emma on the swings while Josh practiced soccer moves. Homework time at the kitchen table, with cookies and milk. I'd help Josh with long division, remembering how I'd taught the same concepts to David decades ago. Emma would practice reading aloud, her finger following each word, looking up at me for approval after every sentence. Dinner preparation was my meditation. Chopping, vegetables stirring sauces, creating something nourishing from simple ingredients. The kitchen would fill with the aroma of garlic and herbs, and even Victoria would sometimes pause to say, "Smells amazing, Margaret." This was my world, simple, purposeful, and full of small joys. I thought it would last forever. The change started so subtly I almost missed it. 3 weeks before my birthday, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room when Victoria came home early from work. She was on her phone, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. When she saw me, she immediately walked to the master bedroom and closed the door, something she'd never done before. "No, Mother, she has to go," I heard her say through the thin walls. "I can't have her here anymore. She's becoming a liability." My hand stilled on Josh's soccer uniform. Liability? I must have misheard. Maybe she was talking about an employee at her real estate firm. But something cold settled in my stomach, an instinct honed by years of reading people's vital signs and knowing when something was wrong. That evening at dinner, Victoria barely touched her food. She kept staring at me with this strange, calculating expression, like she was measuring me for something. When I asked if everything was all right, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Everything's perfect, Margaret. Just thinking about work." But then came the comments. Small ones at first, barely noticeable unless you were paying attention. And after that phone call, I was definitely paying attention. "Margaret, have you considered updating your hairstyle? Gray ages you so much," she said one morning, eyeing my neat bun with distaste. This from the woman who'd always said she loved how I'd embraced my natural color. A few days later, while I was helping Emma with a school project about family heroes, she'd chosen me, which had made my heart swell. Victoria interrupted. "Maybe you should pick someone more impressive, sweetheart, like a real professional or someone important." Emma's face fell. "But Grandma is important." "Of course she is, honey," Victoria said, her tone suggesting otherwise, "just differently important." The credit card statements started disappearing. I only noticed because I usually helped organize the mail, a routine we'd had for years. Now Victoria would snatch them up immediately, shuffling them into her purse with a sharp, "I'll handle these." She began scheduling mysterious appointments. Client meetings, she'd say, but they were at odd hours, 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, Sunday afternoons. Her real estate business was successful, but she'd never worked weekends before, claiming family time was sacred. One afternoon I found her in my room going through my dresser drawers. "Oh, Margaret," she laughed, caught red-handed. "I was just looking for that scarf I lent you. The silk one?" She'd never lent me a scarf. She'd never lent me anything. The atmosphere in the house shifted, like the pressure before a storm. David seemed oblivious, wrapped up in his new promotion, working late hours. But I felt it. The way Victoria would stop talking when I entered a room, how she'd close her laptop quickly when I walked by, the forced politeness that replaced what I'd thought was genuine warmth. Something was coming. Every instinct in my body screamed it, but nothing could have prepared me for what Victoria was actually planning. I spent the next week convincing myself I was being paranoid. At 68, maybe I was becoming one of those suspicious old ladies who imagined conspiracies where none existed. Victoria was under pressure at work. She'd mentioned something about a major development deal that could make or break her year. Of course she was stressed. Of course she was acting differently. When she suggested hosting my birthday party at home instead of our traditional dinner at Antonio's Italian restaurant, I was genuinely touched. We'd gone to Antonio's for the past 4 years. Just family, nothing fancy. But Victoria seemed excited about doing something different. "I want to make this special for you, Margaret," she said, placing her manicured hand over mine at the breakfast table. "You do so much for us. Let me do this for you." Her smile seemed genuine that morning. Maybe I'd imagined the coldness in her eyes lately. This was Victoria, after all. The woman who'd married my son, given me 2 beautiful grandchildren, welcomed me into her home when I had nowhere else to go. "That's very sweet of you, dear," I replied, squeezing her hand back. "But please, don't go to too much trouble." "No trouble at all," she assured me. "I'm inviting some friends from work. They're always hearing about you, about your amazing cooking and how wonderful you are with the kids. They're dying to meet you." Friends from work? That was new. Victoria had always kept her professional and personal lives separate. But maybe this was her way of bridging that gap, of making me feel more included in her world. The thought warmed me. I offered to help with the preparations, cooking, decorating, anything she needed. But Victoria was adamant. "Absolutely not. You just relax. I've got everything under control." David thought it was wonderful. "See, Mom? I told you Victoria appreciates everything you do. This party is her way of showing it." Even the strange incidents from before started to make sense through this new lens. Maybe she'd been planning the party all along, trying to figure out what I'd like, going through my things to understand my style better. The phone calls could have been to caterers or party planners, the credit card statements, party supplies she wanted to keep secret. When I mentioned the party to Mrs. Chen over the fence, she smiled knowingly. "Victoria must be planning something big. I saw a catering van here yesterday when you were at the grocery store." "Catering? For my birthday?" I was overwhelmed by the gesture. We'd never had anything catered before. 2 nights before the party, Victoria even took me shopping. "You need a new dress for your special day," she insisted, driving us to the mall. She helped me pick out a simple navy blue dress, classic and comfortable. "You look lovely, Margaret," she said as I modeled it. For a moment, she sounded like the old Victoria, the one who used to call me Mom and mean it. I went to bed that night feeling foolish for doubting her. Family tensions happened. Misunderstandings were normal, but in the end, we were family, and family looked out for each other. How wrong I was. The morning of my birthday started like any other, except for the flutter of excitement in my chest. I woke earlier than usual, 5 a.m., too anxious to sleep. The house was already buzzing with activity. Victoria had taken the day off work, something she rarely did, and I could hear her downstairs on the phone, coordinating last-minute details. I decided to make myself useful despite her insistence that I relax. The children still needed their breakfast, their Saturday morning routines. I was heading down the hall toward the kitchen when I heard Victoria's voice coming from the master bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, and something in her tone made me pause. "Trust me, after tonight, the problem will be solved. She'll be gone within a week." My blood turned to ice. I stood frozen in the hallway, the laundry basket I'd picked up from the bathroom growing heavy in my arms. Surely I'd misheard. But Victoria continued, her voice carrying that confident tone she used when closing real estate deals. "I've already talked to Sunshine Seniors Living. They have an opening in their memory care unit. It's perfect timing." Memory care unit? My mind raced. That was for people with dementia, Alzheimer's. I was sharp as a tack. I did the New York Times crossword every morning, helped Josh with his advanced math homework, managed the household budget down to the penny. David doesn't know yet, Victoria went on, and I could hear her pacing, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. But he'll agree once he sees how she embarrasses us tonight. I've made sure of that. My legs trembled. I set the laundry basket down silently, afraid she'd hear it drop if my shaking hands let go too suddenly. I've invited all my important clients, the ones from the Riverside development, plus the Blackwoods, the Morgans, the Chen Smiths, all the people who matter. Once they see what we deal with daily, everyone will understand why she needs professional care. What we deal with? I was what they dealt with? Like I was some kind of burden, a problem to be managed? The documentation is already in place, Victoria continued. Dr. Morrison's evaluation from last month confirms cognitive decline. Yes, the one you recommended. He was very accommodating once I explained the situation. And the power of attorney David signed last year for emergency medical decisions? My lawyer says it's enough. To initiate placement, if both David and I agree, she's a danger to herself. I remembered that appointment. Victoria had insisted on it, said it was just routine at my age, even drove me there herself. The questions had seemed excessive, remembering sequences of numbers, drawing clocks, recounting what year it was. Dr. Morrison had seemed nervous, sweating despite the air conditioning, barely making eye contact. The kids, they'll adjust. My mother's already planning to move in next month. She'll be much more suitable for the image we're trying to project. You know how important appearances are in my business. Her mother? Patricia? The woman who'd visited exactly twice in 8 years, who couldn't even remember Emma's birthday. I heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly picked up the laundry basket, hurrying silently back to my room. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she'd hear it through the walls. The party started at 6 o'clock, and by 6:30, the house was full of people I'd never seen before. Victoria had transformed our modest living room into something from a magazine, catered hors d'oeuvres, professional bartender, even hired waitstaff circulating with champagne flutes. Women in designer dresses air-kissed each other, while men in expensive suits discussed golf handicaps and stock portfolios. I wore my new navy dress, had even put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary. Emma had helped me with a touch of lipstick, saying, "You look beautiful, Grandma." But as I moved through the crowd, I felt like a sparrow among peacocks. Victoria's friends looked through me, not at me, offering polite but distant smiles when introduced. "This is Margaret, David's mother," Victoria would say, already moving on before conversations could start. I tried to mingle, sharing a story about the neighborhood's history with a group of women, but they seemed more interested in their phones. When I offered to help in the kitchen, the catered staff looked confused. "We've got it covered, ma'am," they said, as if I was in the way. David was there but distracted, pulled into business conversations by Victoria's colleagues. The children had been sent to a neighbor's house. "Adult party," Victoria had explained, though my birthday celebrations had always included them before. At 7:30, just as I was beginning to wonder when we'd cut the cake I'd glimpsed in the kitchen, Victoria clinked a silver spoon against her champagne glass. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began, her voice carrying that polished tone she used for presentations. "As you know, we're here to celebrate Margaret's 68th birthday." Polite applause. I smiled, feeling oddly disconnected, like I was watching myself from across the room. "But more than that," Victoria continued, "we're here because sometimes love means making difficult decisions." She turned to look at me, and there it was. That cold, calculating expression I'd glimpsed weeks ago. Margaret has been living with us for 5 years now. 5 long years. The emphasis on long wasn't lost on me or, judging by the uncomfortable shifts, on several guests. As many of you know, in real estate and in life, timing is everything. And it's time we addressed what everyone here can see, but might be too polite to mention. She gestured toward me with her champagne glass. "Margaret, Sweet as you are, you've become, how do I put this delicately, an embarrassment to this family. The word hit me like a physical blow. I heard several people gasp. One woman whispered to her husband. But Victoria wasn't done. Look at her, she continued, as if I wasn't standing right there, as if I couldn't hear every word slicing through me. The way she dresses, the stories she tells, the way she shuffles around the house in those orthopedic shoes. This isn't the image David and I need to project as we build our business, our social standing. You all understand, don't you? Success requires certain standards. My face burned. Everyone was staring at me now, some with pity, others with a kind of detached curiosity, like I was an exhibit at a museum. That's why, Victoria raised her glass higher, we've arranged for Margaret to move to Sunshine Seniors Living. It's a wonderful facility, really. They have activities, medical staff, everything someone of her condition needs. What condition? The words escaped before I could stop them, my voice shaking. Victoria's smile was razor sharp. Oh, Margaret, Dr. Morrison's evaluation was quite clear. The forgetfulness, the confusion, the inability to adapt to modern life. It's not your fault, of course. Age comes for us all. But it's time you got professional care, somewhere more, suitable for someone like you. David? I looked at my son, pleading. He stood against the wall, his face pale, staring at his shoes like he had when he was 8 and had broken my mother's vase. It's for the best, Mom, he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. The best? My voice cracked. I raised your children. I saved your home. I've given you everything. And we're grateful, Victoria said smoothly, which is why we're ensuring you're properly cared for. The move is scheduled for Monday. Happy birthday, Margaret. The room was completely silent. Even the waitstaff had frozen, trays in hand, watching this public execution of my dignity. Victoria wasn't finished. She seemed energized by the shocked silence, mistaking it for agreement rather than horror. She walked closer to me, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor like a countdown to my complete destruction. We've already had you evaluated, Margaret. Dr. Morrison, you remember your checkup last month, agrees you're showing signs of significant cognitive decline. She turned to address her audience, as if giving a business presentation. Multiple memory lapses, confusion about dates and times, inability to manage. Complex tasks, it's all documented. My mind raced back to that appointment. The way Victoria had insisted on coming into the examination room with me. How she'd answered questions for me before I could speak. She gets confused about her medications, she'd told Dr. Morrison, though I'd never mixed up a single pill in my life. Sometimes she forgets if she's eaten. Another lie. The doctor had seemed uncomfortable, constantly glancing at Victoria as he administered those tests. The house is getting too much for you, Victoria continued, gesturing around the room I'd cleaned that very morning. Just yesterday you left the stove on. That's not true, I protested, but she talked over me. And frankly, we need the space. My mother, Patricia, is moving in next month to help with the children. Someone more suitable for our lifestyle. Someone who understands the importance of appearances in our social circle. Patricia? Who'd forgotten Josh's name at Christmas? Who'd suggested Emma was getting chunky when the child was perfectly healthy? Who'd spent her last visit criticizing everything from my cooking to the children's public school education? But there's more, Victoria announced, pulling out her phone. I've been documenting Margaret's decline for months. She began scrolling through something. Here, she forgot to pick up Emma from school. That was the day Victoria had changed the pickup time without telling me. I'd arrived at the usual hour to find Emma already collected by the after-school program. Here, she served spoiled food to the children. The leftovers Victoria had insisted were fine, despite being a week old. I'd thrown them out and made fresh sandwiches, but apparently she'd photographed the old container. And this, she held up her phone triumphantly, is the receipt for the gambling debt she's accumulated online. What gambling debt? I was completely lost now. The online bingo, Margaret. $3,000 in the last 6 months. Don't deny it, it came from the household computer. I'd never played online bingo in my life. I barely knew how to use the computer beyond email and reading news. But I suddenly remembered Victoria asking for my social security number months ago for insurance purposes. Richard Blackwood, whom I recognized from newspaper photos, cleared his throat. Victoria, this seems rather orchestrated. Victoria's smile flickered for just a moment. Richard, I understand this might seem harsh, but we've consulted with elder care attorneys. When someone is a danger to themselves and others, especially around children, action must be taken. My lawyer, Harrison Burke, has assured me we're doing everything by the book. Harrison Burke. I knew that name. He'd been in the news for helping families quickly transfer assets from elderly relatives before placing them in state-run facilities. The house, of course, will need to be refinanced once Margaret is settled, Victoria continued. Her name is still on the deed, a technicality from when she helped with the down payment. But with power of attorney and her documented incompetence, that won't be an issue. The $40,000 from my house sale, they were going to take that claim away too. The children don't know yet, Victoria said, her voice taking on a false note of concern. We thought it best to wait until after Margaret is settled. Patricia will help them understand that Grandma is sick and needs special care. Children are resilient. They'll forget quickly enough. Forget? Emma still slept with the blanket I'd knitted for her as a baby. Josh still asked me to check his math homework twice because Grandma explains it better. But none of that mattered to Victoria. I was an embarrassment to be erased, a problem to be solved, an old woman standing between her and the image she wanted to project. The conspiracy was complete, every detail planned, every lie documented. I wasn't just being sent away. I was being systematically erased from my own family's life. My legs began to shake. I reached for the back of a chair to steady myself, and even that simple gesture seemed to confirm Victoria's lies to the watching crowd. See? She said softly, as if concerned. She can barely stand on her own. The room began to spin, not from any medical condition, but from the sheer weight of the betrayal crushing down on me. 8 years. 8 years of my life given freely, lovingly, without question or condition. The memories flooded through me in waves, each one more painful than the last. I saw Emma at 3 years old, burning with fever in the middle of the night. Victoria and David had been at a company retreat, unreachable. I'd stayed up for 48 hours straight, cooling her little body with damp cloths, coaxing medicine between her lips, singing the only song that would calm her. You are my sunshine. Over and over until my voice was hoarse. When the fever finally broke, she looked at me with those bright blue eyes and whispered, "Love you, Gamma." I remembered Josh at 7, sobbing because he'd been bullied at school for his hand-me-down backpack. Victoria had said it built character. I'd taken money from my grocery budget and bought him a new one, telling him it was from a garage sale so Victoria wouldn't object. The joy on his face had fed me more than any meal could. The day David lost his job flashed before me. He'd come home at 2 in the afternoon, devastated, ashamed. Victoria had been showing houses, too busy to answer his calls. But I'd been there. I held my grown son as he cried, the same way I'd held him at 5 when he'd skinned his knee, at 15 when his first girlfriend broke his heart, at 25 when his father's cancer diagnosis came. We'll get through this, I'd promised. We always do. And we had, with my savings. $40,000 transferred without hesitation, without paperwork, without even a thank you beyond that initial tearful hug. The retirement cruise Robert and I had planned, the dream of seeing the Northern Lights together, gone with a few clicks at the bank. But family came first. Always. I thought of the thousands of meals cooked in that kitchen, not just food, but love served on plates. David's favorite pot roast when he'd had bad days. Josh's special birthday pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Emma's chicken soup made from scratch when she was sick, not the canned stuff Victoria bought. The Thanksgiving dinners where I'd wake at 4 a.m. to start the turkey. The Christmas cookies baked with the children. Flour everywhere, their laughter worth more than any clean kitchen. The laundry folded with arthritis-gnarled fingers. The floors mopped on knees that protested every movement. The garden tended in the blazing heat so they'd have fresh vegetables because processed food wasn't good enough for my grandbabies. Every ache, every pain, endured gladly because this was what love looked like, not in words but in action. "Mom?" David's voice broke through my reverie. For a moment, I hoped he'd defend me, tell everyone this was a mistake. But he just stood there. This man I'd raised, taught right from wrong, loved unconditionally, and he said nothing more. Tears finally came then, hot and shameful. Not pretty tears, but the raw, ugly crying of someone whose heart was breaking in real time. Several guests looked away, uncomfortable. One woman whispered to her husband, "This is cruel." But Victoria stood there, unmoved, probably thinking my breakdown proved her point. I looked around at these strangers judging me, at my silent son, at Victoria's triumphant face. She'd taken everything, my dignity, my family, my purpose, and packaged it as concern for my welfare. The cruelest betrayals always come wrapped in kindness. My whole body shook with the force of my sobbing. 68 years old, and I was being discarded like an old appliance that no longer matched the kitchen decor. But worse than the betrayal was the realization that I'd never seen it coming. I'd been so busy loving them, I'd forgotten to protect myself from them. Something shifted in me as I stood there, tears still wet on my cheeks, watching Victoria bask in her moment of victory. The crowd was murmuring, some clearly uncomfortable, others nodding along as if this public humiliation was just another form of evening entertainment. I heard someone whisper, "Poor thing, dementia is so tragic." They'd already accepted Victoria's narrative. I was no longer Margaret the grandmother, the mother, the woman who'd lived a full life. I was just a problem that needed solving. But then Emma's face flashed in my mind, not as she was now, but as she would be in 10 years, 20 years, when she realized what really happened to the grandmother who loved her. Would Victoria tell her I'd abandoned them? That I'd been too sick to love her anymore? The thought of my granddaughter growing up believing those lies ignited something deep within me. Not just anger, but a fierce, protective rage I hadn't felt since a nurse tried to prevent me from seeing Robert in his final hours. I straightened my spine, vertebra by vertebra, the way I used to when facing down difficult doctors who thought nurses didn't know anything. My tears stopped as suddenly as they'd started. 68 years had taught me many things, but the most important was this: sometimes the only way out is through. "You want me gone?" My voice came out stronger than expected, cutting through the murmurs. The room fell silent. Victoria's smile wavered slightly. This wasn't in her script. "Margaret, you're obviously upset," she began, using that condescending tone reserved for children and the elderly. "You think I'm an embarrassment," I continued, taking a step forward. Several people moved back, as if age might be contagious. "You stand there, in the house my money saved, wearing jewelry bought with commissions from deals you only closed because I watched your children, and you call me an embarrassment. Now, Margaret—" David finally spoke, but I raised my hand and he fell silent. The same hand that had wiped his nose, checked his fever, signed his permission slips, and written checks for his college tuition. "No, David. Not now. Not anymore." I looked around the room, meeting eyes that quickly looked away. "You all think you know what you're seeing here. A confused old woman being helped by her caring family, but you don't know the whole truth." Victoria laughed, but it sounded forced. "The whole truth? Margaret, you're proving my point. This confusion, this paranoia. Then let me show you what real embarrassment looks like." The words came out with a clarity that surprised even me. I walked toward the front door, each step deliberate, measured. Not the shuffle Victoria had described, but the determined stride of a woman with purpose. "Where are you going?" Victoria's voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Margaret, you're making a scene." I paused at the door, my hand on the knob. Through the side window, I could see a familiar car parked outside, a black BMW that had arrived just minutes before Victoria's speech. I'd recognized it immediately, though Victoria had been too busy orchestrating my humiliation to notice. "I'm not going anywhere, Victoria, but someone else has been waiting to come in, someone you've been very eager to impress tonight." Her face paled slightly. "What are you talking about?" 2 weeks. That's all I'd had since discovering Victoria's plan. 2 weeks to decide whether to go quietly into that good night or fight for my dignity, my family, my life. 2 weeks to remember that I wasn't just a helpless old woman. I was Margaret Thompson, who'd raised a son alone while working double shifts, who'd held her husband's hand through chemo, who'd started over at 63 and built a new life from scratch. "You made one mistake, Victoria," I said, turning the doorknob. "You underestimated me. You saw an old woman and assumed I was weak, but I've survived things that would break you, and I've been preparing for tonight just as carefully as you have." The door opened, and I saw several people crane their necks to see who was outside. Victoria's confidence crumbled entirely when she saw who was standing there. "After all," I added, "I learned from the best teacher, you. You showed me exactly how cruel family can be. Now let me show you what happens when you underestimate Margaret Thompson." 2 weeks earlier, the morning after I'd overheard Victoria's phone call about Sunshine Seniors Living, I hadn't collapsed in despair. Instead, I'd done what I'd always done in crisis. I got to work. My first call was to my nephew James, a lawyer specializing in elder law who worked 3 states away. I hadn't spoken to him in 2 years, but family is family. "Aunt Maggie?" He'd sounded surprised but pleased. "How are you?" "I need your help, James," quietly. "Can you recommend someone local who handles elder fraud and financial crimes?" The pause was brief. "What's going on?" "I can't explain everything now, but I need protection. Legal protection." James didn't hesitate. "I'll do you one better. I'll come myself. I've got vacation time saved up." While Victoria was at work and the children at school, I'd turned into a detective in my own home. She'd made the mistake of giving me years of access to everything. I did the filing, after all. I knew where she kept her passwords, written in a little notebook in her desk, because she could never remember them. I knew her habits, her schedule, when she'd be distracted by conference calls. What I found in her home office made my blood run cold. It wasn't just about removing me, it was about money. Spreadsheets showing property deals, transfers, commissions. But the numbers didn't add up. Money was moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. Properties were being sold twice on paper. Signatures that looked familiar but wrong. Forged authorization letters from clients. The most damning discovery came when I accessed her email. Victoria had been stealing from her own clients for 2 years, skimming commissions, creating fake property listings, even selling the same investment properties to multiple buyers and pocketing the deposits, $3 million hidden in offshore accounts. And there, in a draft folder, was an email to her mother. "Once Margaret is in the home, we can refinance. Her name on the deed means we get an extra $200,000 equity line. The old fool never even asked for paperwork when she gave us her savings." Old fool. That's what I was to her. I'd photographed everything with the phone Emma had taught me to use, sending copies to James and keeping backup copies in 3 different places. But evidence wasn't enough. Victoria had connections, smooth talk, the ability to spin any story. I needed something more. That's when I remembered Richard Blackwood. Victoria talked about him constantly, her biggest client, the whale that would make her career. She'd been handling a massive property development for him, a $30 million project. If anyone had the power to destroy her, It was him. Finding his personal contact wasn't hard. Victoria had it written in 3 places, starred and highlighted. The call was terrifying. How do you tell one of the state's richest men that his real estate agent is a criminal? Mr. Blackwood, my name is Margaret Thompson, Victoria Ashford's mother-in-law. I have information about your investments you need to see. He'd been skeptical at first, but when I mentioned specific property addresses, specific dollar amounts I'd seen in Victoria's hidden files, his tone changed. Can you prove this? Every word. We'd met at a coffee shop downtown while Victoria was showing houses. I'd spread out the photographs, the evidence, watched his face grow darker with each revelation. It turned out he'd had suspicions, inconsistencies in reports, delays that didn't make sense, fees that seemed inflated. She's stealing from me, he said quietly, dangerously, from all of us. She's planning to move me to a nursing home against my will to cover it up, I explained. Claims I have dementia. This birthday party she's throwing, it's not a celebration. It's a public execution to justify getting rid of the only witness to her crimes. Richard Blackwood was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She doesn't know you know. Not yet. He'd leaned back, a calculating look in his eyes. Mrs. Thompson, how would you like to give Victoria exactly what she deserves? James had arrived 3 days ago, staying at a hotel, preparing everything we needed. Legal documents, recordings, affidavits. He'd even contacted Dr. Morrison, who, when faced with the possibility of losing his medical license for falsifying medical records, had agreed to cooperate fully. Everything was in place. Victoria thought she was the chess master, moving pieces around the board. She never realized she wasn't playing against a pawn. She was playing against the woman who'd taught her son to play chess in the first place. I opened the door fully, and Richard Blackwood stepped into the foyer, his presence immediately commanding the room. He was exactly as the newspapers portrayed him. Tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than I'd spent on clothes in a decade. Behind him stood James, my nephew, carrying a leather briefcase that I knew contained Victoria's complete destruction. Mr. Blackwood? Victoria's voice cracked like a teenager caught smoking behind the school. I didn't know you were. I didn't invite. Mrs. Thompson invited me, Richard said smoothly, his eyes cold as winter steel. She had some very interesting documents to share. Documents about my investments. About all of our investments, actually. The room, which had been buzzing with whispers, fell completely, silent. Several of Victoria's clients straightened up, suddenly very interested. I recognized the Morgans, the Chen Smiths, and at least 3 other families Victoria had mentioned as major clients. I don't understand, Victoria stammered, but her face had gone pale. She knew. Somehow, she knew this wasn't about my birthday anymore. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, she tried, moving toward Richard with her hand extended, that practiced smile flickering on her lips like a dying light bulb. No, I said, stepping between them. You wanted an audience for my humiliation. Let's keep them for your revelation. James moved forward, setting his briefcase on the coffee table with a deliberate thud. Good evening, everyone. My name is James Thompson. I'm an attorney specializing in elder law and financial crimes. I'm also Margaret Thompson's nephew. Victoria's eyes darted between us, calculating, trying to figure out how much we knew. This is ridiculous. Margaret is confused. She's been showing signs of dementia? James pulled out a document. Interesting you should mention that. This is an affidavit from Dr. Harrison Morrison, dated yesterday, stating that you, Mrs. Ashford, paid him $5,000 to falsify medical records indicating my aunt has cognitive decline. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a champagne glass, the crash punctuating the moment. That's absurd, Victoria protested, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. Is it? Richard Blackwood spoke up. Because Mrs. Thompson showed me something even more interesting. Tell me, Victoria, about the Riverside development property, The one you sold to me for $15 million, and then sold again to Mr. Chen here for $12 million. Mr. Chen, a quiet man who'd been standing in the corner, stepped forward. What do you mean? Sold again? James pulled out more papers, spreading them across the coffee table like dealing cards in a poker game where Victoria had just lost everything. These are property records, bank transfers, forged documents. Mrs. Ashford has been running multiple property scams, creating fake listings, and stealing from every single client in this room. The atmosphere shifted from uncomfortable to hostile. Victoria's clients began pressing closer, voices rising. You handled our retirement fund property. The beach house investment? Was that even real? Where's our money, Victoria? Victoria backed up against the wall, her designer heels clicking frantically. This is all a misunderstanding. Margaret is sick. She's stolen these documents. I had my forensic accountant review everything, Richard interrupted, his voice cutting through the chaos. $3 million. That's the conservative estimate of what you've stolen. From us. From the very people you invited here tonight to watch you destroy this woman. David, who had been frozen in shock, finally spoke. Victoria, tell them it's not true. Tell them. She turned to him, and for a moment the mask completely dropped. Oh, shut up, David. You were happy enough to spend the money. The cars, the private schools, this house. Where did you think it all came from? Your mediocre marketing salary. The room erupted. Someone was already on the phone. I heard the word police repeated several times. Victoria tried to push through the crowd toward the door, but her own guests, her victims, blocked her path. Going somewhere? Mrs. Morgan asked acidly. I don't think so. My husband is on the phone with the FBI. Wire fraud across state lines. That's federal, isn't it, Mr. Thompson? James nodded. 20 years minimum with these amounts. Through the chaos, I heard it. Sirens in the distance, growing louder. Victoria heard them too. She spun toward me, her perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. You did this, she snarled. You ruined everything. No, Victoria, I said quietly, my voice carrying despite the noise. You did this. I just made sure everyone could see it. James opened his briefcase fully now, pulling out document after document, laying them out like evidence in a courtroom. The coffee table became an exhibit of Victoria's crimes, and her clients pressed closer, recognizing their own signatures, their own properties, their own stolen dreams. This is my signature, Mrs. Chen Smith said, pointing at a document. But I never signed this. This property in Riverside, I was told it fell through. Because she sold it to me instead, Richard Blackwood said grimly, for $3 million more than you were paying. Wait, Mr. Morgan grabbed another paper. This says I authorized a transfer of $200,000 for a property inspection. I never... His face went red. This is forgery. Victoria's carefully constructed world was collapsing in real time. But there was more. James pulled out a small digital recorder, holding it up for everyone to see. There's something else you all should hear, he announced. This is a recording from Dr. Morrison's office made with his cooperation and legal consent. He pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, clear and damning. I need you to say she has dementia, doctor. I don't care what your tests show. 5,000 now, another 5 when she's placed in the home. Once she's declared incompetent, I can access the rest of her accounts. The old woman has another 40,000 hidden somewhere, probably in bonds or CDs, plus her Social Security, her husband's pension. It all adds up. Dr. Morrison's nervous voice responded, but she passed every cognitive test. She's sharper than most 40-year-olds. Then give her harder tests. Confuse her. I'll be in the room. I'll make sure she fails. Do this, or I'll make sure everyone knows about your little prescription problem last year. The recording clicked off. The silence was deafening. Blackmail, someone whispered. She blackmailed a doctor. Victoria's face had gone from pale to gray. She looked like She might faint. But then David spoke, his voice broken but clear. "Tell them about Mom's money," he said quietly. Every eye turned to him. He was crying now, openly, unashamed. "Tell them," he continued, louder now, "about the 40,000 she gave us, her entire life savings. Tell them how you took out credit cards in her name. Tell them about the life insurance policy you tried to forge." "David," Victoria shrieked, "shut up. You're ruining everything." "I already ruined everything by marrying you," he shot back. "Mom showed me everything yesterday, every document, every crime, every lie you told me about her." That's when Victoria made her mistake. In her panic, she pulled out her phone, frantically trying to delete something. But James was faster, grabbing her wrist. "I wouldn't do that," he said calmly. "Destroying evidence is another felony." The sirens had stopped. We could hear car doors slamming outside, footsteps on the porch. Victoria made one last desperate attempt, turning to the crowd with tears in her eyes. Fake tears, I knew now, just like everything else about her. "Please, you don't understand. She's setting me up. Margaret's the one who's been stealing. She has access to all our accounts, all our computers. Check the records. Everything was done from our home computer, and she's here all day." For a moment, just a moment, some people looked uncertain. It was almost believable. Almost. That's when I played my own final card. "You're right, Victoria. Everything was done from the home computer." I pulled out my own phone, the one Emma had taught me to use. "But you forgot that Emma helped me set up a nanny cam app last year to watch the house when we're at the park. It's been recording the home office for months." I showed the screen to Richard, who smiled grimly. "Motion activated. Every time you sat at that computer, Victoria, every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, date and time stamped." The front door opened. 2 FBI agents entered, followed by 3 local police officers. The lead agent, a woman with short dark hair and kind eyes, looked at the assembled crowd. "We're looking for Victoria Ashford." "That's her," Richard Blackwood pointed. "And we're all witnesses to her confession." Victoria tried to run, actually tried to bolt for the back door in her designer heels. She made it 3 steps before Mrs. Morgan, 70 years old and tough as nails, stuck out her foot. Victoria went down hard, her designer dress tearing, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face. As the officers helped her up and began reading her rights, Victoria looked at me one last time. "You destroyed my life." "No," I said, standing tall despite my arthritis, despite my age, despite everything. "I saved my family." The officers led her out in handcuffs, past all her former clients, past the catering staff recording everything on their phones, past the neighbors who'd gathered on the lawn. The last thing I heard her scream was, "This isn't over. I'll get out. You'll pay for this, Margaret." But it was over, and the only payment coming was justice. Long overdue. 6 months later, I stood in my new apartment, smaller than the house I'd shared with David's family, but entirely mine. The morning sun streamed through windows I'd decorated with lace curtains, the kind Victoria had called grandmother tacky, but which reminded me of the home Robert and I had shared. The apartment wasn't fancy, just a cozy 2-bedroom in a senior-friendly complex downtown, but it had everything I needed: a small balcony for my garden, a kitchen where I could cook without criticism, and most importantly, peace. The whistleblower reward from the FBI had been substantial: $300,000, 10% of the recovered stolen funds. Richard Blackwood had personally ensured I received every penny, even hiring his own lawyers to expedite the process. "You saved us all, Mrs. Thompson," he'd said at our last meeting. "This is the least we can do." Victoria was serving 5 years in federal prison, though her lawyer had tried desperately to get it reduced. The evidence was too overwhelming. 23 counts of wire fraud, 6 counts of forgery, 1 count of elder abuse, and 3 counts of blackmail. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Hernandez, who happened to be 72 herself, had shown no mercy. "Mrs. Ashford," Judge Hernandez had said at sentencing, You didn't just steal money. You attempted to destroy a woman who showed you nothing but love. You tried to rob your own children of their grandmother. You represent the worst kind of greed, the kind that consumes family. 5 years, and may you use them to reflect on what truly matters in life. The lawsuit against Dr. Morrison had been swift and successful. He lost his medical license and paid a settlement of $150,000, which I used to establish the Margaret Thompson Fund for Elder Justice, a nonprofit that helps elderly victims of family fraud find legal representation. We'd already helped 12 families in our first 3 months. David stood in my doorway now, as he did every Saturday morning, holding a box of pastries from my favorite bakery. The divorce had been hard on him, but therapy was helping. The kids came with him every other weekend when he had custody, and we were slowly rebuilding what Victoria had tried to destroy. "Morning, Mom," he said quietly, still carrying that shame in his shoulders, though I'd forgiven him months ago. "Morning, sweetheart. Are those chocolate croissants I smell?" He smiled, a real smile, not the forced ones from the Victoria era. Emma insisted. She says nobody needs chocolate for breakfast more than Grandma. Emma bounded in behind him, taller now at 9, but still my sunshine. "Grandma, guess what? I got the lead in the school play. I'm going to be Alice in Wonderland." "That's wonderful, darling." I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her strawberry shampoo, remembering all the mornings. Victoria had been too busy to braid her hair. Josh followed, now 11 and quieter since everything happened, but working through it with a counselor. "Hi, Grandma, I brought my math homework. Mom—" He caught himself. Victoria had lost custody completely, but old habits died hard. "I mean, Dad says you're still the best at explaining fractions." "Of course, sweetheart. After breakfast, we'll tackle those fractions together." We sat around my small dining table, the one piece of furniture I'd taken from the old house, the one Robert had built with his own hands 40 years ago. David had fought Victoria's family to let me have it, one of the first times he'd stood up for me. "Any word from Victoria's mother?" I asked David quietly while the kids were distracted with their breakfast. He shook his head. "Patricia disappeared after the trial. Apparently she's telling everyone in Florida that Victoria was framed." He paused, then added, "Nobody believes her." The kids had adapted remarkably well. Their therapist said children are resilient when surrounded by truth and love, instead of lies and manipulation. Emma still asked about her mother occasionally, and I always answered honestly but gently. Mommy made some bad choices and needs time to learn from them. Josh understood more but said less, protecting his sister in his quiet way. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, a different Mrs. Chen from the party, this one a retired teacher, knocked on the door. "Margaret, I have too many tomatoes from my garden. Trade you for some of your basil?" This was my life now. Simple trades, genuine friendships, no pretense. The seniors in my building had embraced me as one of their own. We had potlucks every Tuesday, played cards on Thursdays, and looked out for each other. Real community, not the fake networking Victoria had valued so highly. "Mom," David said suddenly, "I never really apologized, not properly." "David, we've been through this." "No, please, let me say it." He took a deep breath. "I failed you. As a son, as a man, as a human being. I let her convince me that success meant money and appearances. I stood there while she humiliated you. I was weak, and I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." I reached across the table and took his hand, the same hand I'd taught to hold a pencil, to tie shoes, to be gentle with smaller creatures. "You were manipulated by someone very skilled at manipulation," I said softly. "The important thing is that you see it now, that you're here now, that we're family now." "We're getting stronger," he said, squeezing my hand. "All of us." And we were. Slowly, carefully, like tending a garden after a harsh winter. We were growing again. The trust would take time to fully rebuild, but the love, The love had always been there, waiting beneath Victoria's poison, ready to bloom again in healthier soil. As I sit here now, watching Emma and Josh play in my small living room, their laughter filling the space with genuine joy, I often think about that night, my 68th birthday, the night I was supposed to disappear quietly into a nursing home, erased from my family's life like an inconvenient stain on Victoria's perfect image. The woman who called me an embarrassment is now prisoner DIN 47829 in a federal facility 200 miles away. She writes letters sometimes, not to apologize, but to blame, to threaten, to manipulate, even from behind bars. I don't read them anymore. I gave the first few to James for legal documentation, but now they go straight into the trash. Some poison doesn't deserve our attention. Richard Blackwood visited last week. He's become an unexpected friend, this powerful man who could have simply recovered his money and moved on. Instead, he's helped fund our elder justice nonprofit, understanding that Victoria wasn't unique. She was just one of many predators who see the elderly as easy targets, as embarrassments to be managed rather than humans to be cherished. "You know what impressed me most, Margaret?" he said over coffee and my homemade apple pie. "You could have warned Victoria, could have confronted her privately, maybe worked out some deal to protect yourself, but you didn't." "She needed to be stopped," I replied simply. "Not just for me, but for everyone she would have hurt next. When people show you who they really are, believe them." The truth is, I learned something valuable at 68 years old. We're never too old to fight back. Society wants to paint elderly people as weak, confused, irrelevant. Outdated models that should be quietly replaced with newer versions. Victoria counted on that stereotype. She saw gray hair and assumed gray matter. She saw wrinkled hands and assumed they couldn't hold evidence. She saw a woman who shops at thrift stores and assumed she couldn't afford justice. She was wrong on every count. But here's what breaks my heart. I was lucky. I had a nephew who was a lawyer. I found evidence before Victoria could destroy it. I had Richard Blackwood's ear at the right moment. How many others don't have these advantages? How many elderly parents are sitting right now in homes they didn't choose, their dignity stripped away by family members who see them as ATMs or embarrassments? The National Center on Elder Abuse reports that family members commit 90% of elder abuse. Family. The people we trust most, love most, sacrifice everything for. They're statistically the most likely to harm us when we're vulnerable. 1 in 10 Americans over 60 will experience elder abuse, but only 1 in 24 cases gets reported. Why? Because who reports their own child? Who admits their daughter-in-law is stealing from them? Who wants to believe the baby they raised has grown into a predator? We do this to ourselves too, in smaller ways. We apologize for our appearance, our slower pace, our need for reading glasses to see the menu. We make ourselves smaller to fit into a world that worships youth and dismisses experience. We stay quiet when the conversation moves past us, accepting irrelevance as if it's natural instead of imposed. But here's what I know now, what Robert would have been proud to see me learn. Our value isn't in our usefulness to others. It's not in how much we can still contribute to someone's lifestyle or image. Our value is inherent, earned through decades of living, loving, surviving, and thriving. Every wrinkle tells a story. Every gray hair is a battle won. Every creaking joint is a testament to years of standing strong for others. Emma asked me last week if I was sad about what happened with her mom. I told her the truth. I'm sad about who your mom chose to become, but I'm not sad about standing up for myself. Sometimes, sweetheart, the biggest gift you can give your family is showing them that nobody has the right to make you feel worthless. She hugged me then, this little girl who still has so much to learn about the world, and whispered, "You're not worthless, Grandma, you're wonderful." That's all any of us wants to hear, isn't it? That we matter, that our presence is a gift, not a burden, that our stories deserve to be heard, not silenced, that our final chapters can be about triumph, not just decline. If you're watching this and you're in a situation like mine was, being gaslit, manipulated, told you're too old, too embarrassing, too much trouble, please know this: you are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not worthless. Document everything. Tell someone you trust. Contact Adult Protective Services or an elder law attorney. Fight back, not with Victoria's weapons of cruelty and greed, but with truth and courage. And if you're watching this as someone with elderly parents or grandparents, ask yourself, when did you last really see them? Not just look at them, but see them. Their dreams that might still be unfulfilled. Their fears they might be too proud to voice. Their love that never asks for anything in return. When did you last thank them, not for what they can do for you now, but for all they've already done? Our elders aren't embarrassments. They're libraries of wisdom, museums of history, gardens of love that took decades to grow. They deserve our protection, our respect, and yes, our admiration. They've earned their place at every table, in every conversation, in every family photo. Not in the background, but front and center where they belong. So I ask you now, what would you do if your family tried to throw you away? Would you go quietly, or would you stand up like I did? And more importantly, what are you doing today to make sure no elderly person in your life ever has to make that choice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video if it touched your heart. Subscribe to hear more stories of triumph over betrayal. And please, share this with someone who needs to remember that family isn't about blood or convenience. It's about love, respect, and standing up for what's right, no matter how old you are. Remember, you're never too old to fight for your dignity, and you're never too young to start protecting those who protected you first. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write your own and make it count.